brought to you by the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education and the SLOCO Arts Collaborative.
Hey there, this is Touching Bass, and you're back for the fourth video in the series where we dive further into scales and intervals, the building blocks of harmony.
Ba-dum, 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 boom, boom, ba-dum, boom, 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 boom.
We're going to get right into it with the C major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's the fifth interval? The perfect fifth, do you remember? We'll do this C right here. Do, so, do, so. It's the G. Remember how I told you these scale degrees are best friends? Those two notes played together form a chord. A chord is any set of harmonic pitches consisting of multiple notes that are played simultaneously or nearly so. From the scales we learned, we can take certain notes and combine them to make chords. Think of notes like atoms, the building blocks of music. And think of chords like molecules, which are larger structures that will build the foundation of the song. The do and so, or 1 and 5, played together form a power chord. An A power chord is just the A and E played together. I want you to keep thinking of the 1 and 5 as best friends. Why? Well, because they sound great together, just the two of them. Here's the 1 and 5. Now the bass is not really a chord instrument, but it's very easy to play these power chords on the guitar. Here's my C, there's my fifth G. Play them together, I've got a nice strong power chord. Rock music loves power chords. It lacks the definition or emotion of a bigger chords with more notes, but it's got all the power and sound with just the 1 and the 5 ringing together. Now, what if we add another note to the 1 and 5? When you add the third or the 3 to the 1 and 5, you're going to get something special. It's called a triad chord. Major and minor triads make up most of your basic chords which form the harmony of a song. Chords will often correspond to the scale you're using. To start, we have major chords and minor chords. It does get more complicated, but we'll save that for later. Let's take on major triads first. You need 3 notes to make a simple major chord. You've got your scale. So which notes do you choose? The 1 and the 5, of course, and also the 3, also known as do, mi, so. This forms your 1 chord or your home chord. If I'm in the key of C major, or C for short, the 1, 3, and 5 scale degrees will be my C chord. This chord will feel like home in a similar way that the C note feels like home. And with the bass here, we can actually outline the chords. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. We call this playing an arpeggio. An arpeggio is the notes of a chord played in succession. It can be descending or ascending. Here on this chart of the major scale, I've shaded the root note of the scale and the octave. So that's the 1 and the 8. I put a triangle around the 1, 3, and 5 here because those notes form the triad chord. And just the 1 and 5 form the power chord. Here I start on fret number 2 on the E string. This is technically the F sharp major scale. Thus, the triangle numbers are the F sharp major arpeggio, based on the root note or your starting note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is my octave. So what happens when we put the 1
3 and 5 together. Ooh, they sound pretty, don't they? And if I want to play the arpeggio of that, and I can also add the octave in there if I would like to, because these two are technically, for these purposes, the same note. So here we go for the arpeggio. And I can play them all at the same time too. See how adding this note, this octave, doesn't really change the way the chord sounds, it just fills it out more.
You also need 3 notes to make a minor chord. And we're still using the 1, 3, and 5, but instead we use the minor scale. So we do the Do, Me, and So. So if I want to do the C minor, I'd go 1, 2, 3, Do, Me, So, So, Me, Do.
Here is my C minor scale on the piano. And if I want to do the 1, 3, and 5 here, there we go. There's the C minor chord. If I want to play the arpeggio notes, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. And of course you can always spread your hand out and add in that octave note there. This is a chord instrument, so often this is going to be playing along with the bass. If I wanted to on this instrument, I could just play these 2 notes and the bass could play that. This is the minor scale, F sharp minor to be exact, and again I've shaded the root of the scale and the octave, numbers 1 and 8. And I've drawn triangles around the 1, 3, and 5 to exhibit the arpeggio notes of the chord F sharp minor, which corresponds to the scale. Now you can take this pattern and move it anywhere on the neck to get different scales, and the scale will be based on your starting note, or your 1.
So here's an A major outlined. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the octave here. And I could easily translate this into 1, 3, 5, 8. And if I want to make that minor, then we instead do 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 3, 5, 8. Do you hear the difference? Major chords have a brighter sound and minor chords have a darker, gloomier sound. We've said before that major scales correspond to happy and minor scales correspond to sad. It's the same with the chords. Now, like we said, the bass doesn't play chords. That's the guitar's job. The bass usually plays 1 note at a time. Otherwise, the sound is what we call muddy. Hear that? It's not as clear and as pretty as the bass's job is to be both rhythmic and a melodic foundation. I like to think if the drums and the guitar had a baby, it would be the bass. So most often the bass will be playing the root note of the chord at the moment that the chord first happens. So at that 1 of the chord. Notes are important here, but so is timing. The root note is the 1 of the chord. Say the guitar is playing an A major chord. The bass technically has 3 options for this chord. You can play the 1, you can play the 3, or you can play the 5. They will all sound different and they will all sound good in their own way. To choose a different note other than the 1, 3, and 5 would change what the chord is. The bass player actually has a lot of power in deciding how each chord will sound. I can show you more of what I mean with the piano. Usually with the piano, the left hand plays bass notes and bass lines. So if I want to play an A major chord, A chord for short, then I can play the A or any other notes in the chord with my left hand. So here's the 1 or the root of the chord. That's the 3rd. That's what it sounds like if you play the 3rd in the bass. And there's the 5th. That's what it sounds like when you play the 5th in the bass. And of course I don't have to play the octave here, I can just go. I can even play all 3 in order, and I can line out the chord. Here's what it sounds like if I want to play the arpeggio. Let's try it with A minor. Here's with my A, my root in the bass, and now the minor 3rd in the bass, and the 5th, E, C for the 3rd, and of course, A for the bass. Here I'll play the arpeggio notes with my left hand and the chord of A minor with my right hand. It adds some nice movement under the harmony created by the chords. Most often you will probably want to play the 1 of the chord with the bass, at least in the beginning. You can even make up bass lines based around the chords being used. Just try to land on the 1 when the chord changes. You can make this as simple or as complicated as you want. That's the beauty of this instrument. And you can play other notes in the key to make some really wacky chords. Now, the guitar is playing an A minor chord. What options do I have? If you said the 1, 3, and 5 of the A minor scale, then get out your gold stars because you are correct. Now this makes a shape as well. I like to think of it as a triangle because there's 3 points. And I can make this shape anywhere on the instrument, and as long as you land in the right place, you can always find your 1, 3, and 5. This is a minor chord shape. It uses the tonic, minor 3rd, and perfect 5th intervals. This is the major chord shape. It uses the tonic, major 3rd, and perfect 5th intervals. So if the guitar is playing a D major chord, here's what I do. I go to my D for the tonic. I can always find the 3 there, and there's the 5. Maybe I want to play the octave too. If the piano is playing a G minor, here's where I go. Here's my G, minor 3rd, 5th, octave 2. Let's outline an A major chord going to a D major chord with that same pattern of 1, 3, 5, 3. So what am I doing here? I'm starting with the A, I go to its third, which is C sharp, and then I go to its fifth, which is E. And then I move on to the next chord, which is D, and I start with the tonic note, and then I move to the third, which is F sharp, then I go to the fifth, which is A, and I go right back here to the F sharp. Now let's do C minor to F minor. Got a good old C minor right here. And I'm starting there with the C, and I go to its minor third right here, which is a E flat, and then I go to its fifth here, which is a G, and back to the third. And for my F here, I start with my tonic for the F of the chord. I go here to my A flat note, which is the minor third, and then the fifth, which is a C. Back to the third again. Now, back to scales, which make up the key of a song. Say we are in the key of B major, which uses the B major scale. The one chord of a B major key is, you guessed it, it's B major. That is the 1, 3, and 5 of the B major scale. So the 5 also unlocks important chords for the key. The 5 chord, written like this, the 5 chord is known to point back to the 1 chord. If we're in B major, the 5 chord is F sharp major. The 5 of the scale is going to define the 5 chord. On the bass, you can use the same pattern as before, right? So something looking like, remember that shape I showed you? You can use it anywhere, and as long as you start in the right place, you'll hit the right notes. 1, 3, 5 shape, but within this key of B major, we're looking at the 5, 7, and 9 scale degrees of the B major scale. I know what you're thinking. Whoa. Alyssa, you said there were 7 notes in the scale and 8 is the octave. Well, remember how I said the scale repeats itself in higher versions? The 9 is like the 2 in disguise. It's re, but instead it's re, higher. So it's the higher version of the 2 of the scale. The 2 of B is C sharp. In cases of the piano, you will often hear people specify the octave by saying C3 or up to C4, and it can help to be more specific about what pitch and placement your note is specifically on. With the bass, you can play lower or higher notes depending on the sound you're looking for, but often you'll want to play the low to mid-range notes. I will say, sometimes my B note on my B string can feel too low, like too muddy, so I may not use this note as often as the B right here. Just to hammer it in, what do you think will be the 5 chord for C major? G major. It goes along with the circle of fifths and the 5th of C. Now, what chord do you think is going to be very important other than the 1 and the 5 chord? It's the 4 chord. This chord is built on the 4th note of the key. If we're in B minor, then the 4th note is E, and the 4th chord is E minor. It is these notes that we form our minor shape, but for here, the 4 chord, it corresponds to the 4, 6, and 8, where 8 is the octave to our tonic. So within the 4 chord is our tonic note, so I can actually play that note both on the 1 chord and the 4 chord. So within a major key, the tonic, the 4, and the 5 chords will all be major unless you are consciously doing something weird. We do want most of our music choices to be consciously done. Another important chord is the relative minor chord of our key, also known as the minor sixth. It's written like this. Majors get big numbers and minors get little numbers. Let's go back to the circle of fifths. This C and the A minor under it show not only the relative key, but also C major's minor sixth chord. All I need is my handy minor shape, and I'll know 3 notes I can play if a song goes to this chord. It corresponds to the 6th, 8th, and 10th degrees of the scale, so it's got that octave in it, just like the 4. The octave directly corresponds to the tonic, so as you can see, a lot of the chords use the tonic, which will really help us be pointed back to the key. So many pop songs in major keys will only have 4 chords. The major 1 chord, the major 4 chord, the major 5 chord, and the minor 6 chord. You can do so much with these chords just by putting them in different orders and different rhythms. Let's add another chord to the mix. In the major scale, the 3rd degree corresponds to the 3 chord, which is a minor 3 chord. It's the 3, 5, 7 of the scale. In the key of C major, this is E minor. There it is. In the case of minor keys, the 1, 4, and 5 chords will be minor chords and correspond to those same numbers. Do you remember the 5 chord scale numbers? 5, 7, and 9. What about the 4 chord? 4, 6, and 8. Note that pattern that they have of skipping the number in between each. I want you to flex what we've learned so far. Let's look at D minor, the key. What's the 1 chord? D minor. What's the perfect 4th of D? It's G. So that makes our 4 chord of D minor, the G minor chord. What's the 5 chord? Well, what's the perfect 5th of D? That's A, so the 5 chord of D minor is A minor. I should tell you, there's an exception. The 5 chord of D minor is A minor unless you're not using the natural minor scale. There's another minor scale that's good for you to learn. It's called the harmonic minor scale, and it's very similar to the natural minor scale, but the minor 7th interval is raised a semitone to become instead a major 7th interval. It sounds like this. It's really just the ending that's different. The major 7th really tries to pull you to the tonic. It adds that extra oomph. We call it a leading tone because it's trying really hard to lead us home, to our home note. Because of that note, our 5 chord of D minor becomes, instead of A minor, A major. So minor keys like to play with the 5 chord. Sometimes it will be major and it will add tension to really point you back to the 1 chord or the chord that feels like home. In a minor key, what scale degree will be important for the 6th chord? The 6th. In a minor key, this chord is going to be a major 6 chord with the same scale degrees, 6, 8, and 10. In A minor, what is the major 6 chord? It's F major. In A minor, what do you think is going to be your major 3 chord based on what you know? For this, we can consult the circle of fifths. It's going to be C. For minor keys, the 3rd interval which is also known as the minor third, also corresponds to its relative major key, and that's going to tell you what its relative major is. If we look at the minor third of A and the third scale degree of A minor, we will find C. It won't be a minor chord like the 1, 4, and 5. This one is major and corresponds to the 3, 5, and 7th scale degrees of the minor scale. It's this shape on the bass that you already know. Knowing these shapes on the bass, along with knowing where your notes are, is really going to help you. For now, it's a great idea to play the bassist note of the chord as your bass note. For C major, what is that? C. For F sharp minor, that's F sharp. Let's try a little exercise where you can do, honestly, whatever you want on the bass, as long as on the downbeat you return to the 1, which here is going to be our A, because we're going to be in the key of A minor. Let's see here. Stay tuned for next time.
Ba-dum, 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 boom, boom, ba-dum, boom.